You'd like to start? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for school board meeting on September 28th, starting at 6:30 p.m. Board members are all present. I'm welcome all the guests that are here. For our land recognition, I will offer that we stand on land that we did not inherit fairly. In fact, it was taken deceptively and violently from the original inhabitants, the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot. So I invite us to always step lightly, to care deeply, to carry on the traditions of peaceful living with the land, with the water, with one another, as we work to remedy the trauma of the past and pass on the goodness of this land to the next generations. I invite us to approve the agenda for tonight. Someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? If you approve the agenda for tonight, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone not approving the agenda? So the agenda is approved as it is before us. Move on to public comment. Deb, do we have any public comment tonight?
Do not.
Okay, thank you. Move on to reports. Dr. Herndon, Superintendent's report.
Yes, good evening. So I wanted to just touch upon a few of the areas that we're working on. The main area that I wanted to touch on were strides that we're trying to improve in our communications. We have some, during our cabinet meeting today, we had a conversation with an organization that's hopefully going to allow us to increase the speed and outreach of our communications from the classroom. And Ms. Chen has also been working diligently on some software and apps that will allow classroom teachers to better connect with multiple languages that we have, many multiple languages beyond just the top 5 or 6 that we have family liaisons for, which is obviously an incredible resource, but we have a lot of languages beyond that. So we're trying to increase our ability to increase those communications to those families and communities. So those are 2 of the areas that we're looking at for that. And we still have our open communications director position here, and the new communications lead at Puget Sound DSD starts this Friday. So I'll be connecting with that person as well to help fill in the additional services we may be looking at beyond our own internal communications person. Additionally, I had a conversation today with someone. I'm sending them information about our upcoming community conversations around SROs. It's a really good conversation. I think this person's going to be very helpful. So he's going to take a look at the information that we have. This was somebody who was suggested by our race and equity training lead, Eileen Yoshina at Puget Sound DSD. So she gave me this name. She actually gave me the name of his brother as well, but he informed me today that his brother just went out on sabbatical. So his brother's not available. So he's looking at his calendar. We had actually connected last year. So I believe he could be a great resource for us moving forward. And he works with King County in a lot of areas around violence prevention, restorative justice. I think he's just going to be a great resource for us moving forward. So those were the 2 main pieces that I wanted to touch on tonight. And I know we're starting our first COVID-19 report. So we'll have our district nurse, Hannah Mestro, up next.
Yes, Hannah, can you give us a COVID-19 report?
Hello, my name is Hannah Meister. I'm the district nurse. Under the COVID report, we've kind of gone over the types of guidelines that we follow, which is under the DOH. We've been following their guidelines closely, and we also developed a COVID dashboard that displays the number of cases in each school, as well as the number of staff cases that we have. So I believe this particular dashboard that's being shown right now has been updated on the 22nd, and it's updated as needed whenever a case comes up. This dashboard is going to be available on our website, so staff and families can see them. And then this goes over a couple of the guidelines that we follow. This is from the recommendations of the Department of Health. It goes over the face coverings, which are required indoors and outdoors, social distancing, students are distanced at least 3 feet, and staff members are distanced 6 feet or more. Screening access stations are no longer required. Instead, we are encouraging parents to perform these screenings at home before they send their kids to school. Vaccinations will be required for staff members by October 18th. And the students for now are not going to be required. And then disinfecting of shared spaces, high touch areas are done every day and as needed, depending on the caseload. Contact tracing, if there's a positive case, myself and along with the COVID team, who includes Jennifer Jones and Aaron Dragonoff, along with the principals and other key directors and staff members are notified, and steps are taken to notify the families and the parents via letter and phone call. And this involves, or this includes quarantine dates and any resources they might need. COVID testing options. So we have multiple tests that are available to students, staff, and their families. This includes curative and Everlywell tests. And for athletic screenings, we have Binax Now tests, which are rapid tests that take between 15 to 30 minutes to show a result. And I believe that's it. There's also a bunch of, resources as well as this COVID dashboard available on our site. And then finally, we're always in constant contact with the Department of Health when it comes to, clearing up some guidelines or reporting cases that may have been a school-based transmission.
Hannah, if a staff member asks if they can obtain a COVID test, is that given to them?
That's correct. So we would give them the Everlywell test, which is a take-home test that can be done nasally, and they would just ship that off and get the result within about 24 hours normally.
Okay. Because that's been apparently someone was told they couldn't get one, and I just wanted to clarify that they do have access to it.
We do. So recently we got a new set of them. So the older ones, we were told expired within 5 months of receiving them. So that's why the staff weren't able to. So we just recently got the newer.
Okay, thank you. And then are any of the schools close to being, what's the criteria for closing a school down?
That is up to the DOH. I believe it would be a certain amount of school-based transmissions. So far, we've only got one school-based transmission that happened in one of our schools. And we're working with the DOH closely when every time we get we are suspicious of a school-based transmission, we're always communicating with the DOH. And kind of they have contact tracers that they'll who will call the close contacts and whoever's involved in the case and kind of determine whether or not there are other events or things that they could have caught the virus from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on that, we had a meeting with area superintendents and health officials. We have another one tomorrow. But Department of Health was very clear. They were not going to put out any metric about what it would take to close down a school. They were clear. They're just like, they're not putting out a number. So if people are looking for that, they're not going to do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Hannah. That's a good start on this. I know that we're going to have more questions that are going to come up when we get to the school safety plan on the agenda. One comment I would make is just to make sure that we know that dashboard is current. I mean, it's not saying that we have only closed one classroom at CV. It means that right now, one classroom is closed. If that's what it said, I didn't actually look at it, but I know people have looked at that and asked questions. Well, I know 4 classrooms were closed. I understand that, but 3 of them are open again. So I think it's just important to make sure that people know that dashboard is what's happening right now and does not reflect what's happened from the beginning of school. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, I think I'll probably have to mess around with the vocabulary a little bit. There's the current cases and then there's the total cases. The total would be, from the beginning of the school year versus the current, which is how many are quarantining at that moment.
Yes.
So I think I'll take that. Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. And I'll mess around with the words that we use because that's definitely very important.
It is. Thank you.
So I was going to just follow up quickly on that. Yeah, I got the same kind of feedback that people were looking at that and thinking it was the cumulative and the total and not the current, although it is current. And so a suggestion would be if you look at the Peninsula School District site, they have a nice layout for their COVID and they show basically both. So they show here's what the current is and here's what the total is, and they make that very clear. And I think people are probably interested in both. So you might just take a look at you can just Google the Peninsula School District out on the Olympic Peninsula, and people have told me that it's a nice layout that's worked pretty well for them. So it's just a suggestion.
And directors, is it okay if we save the rest of the COVID questions until we get to the safety plan? Because that's kind of how we address them in our questions. So we will come back to those, and I'm sure that Hannah, you'll have some more input for us at that time. So thank you. Let's move to our director reports. I'm going to suggest that we go alphabetical by first names tonight, just so you know what order we're going in. So that would be Bridget, Dave, Edna, and Jan. So Bridget, do you have a director report this evening?
I do. So I'll go ahead and pull that up. So I wanted to start with just a bit of an introduction since it's the beginning of the school year. So my commitment to our district and as an educator leader, welcome students, district staffs, and community members who are here tonight. And let's hold space for our ancestors and those not in attendance, our future scholars, as decisions made this year will impact their lives. My name is Bridget Nidia Poa Ryder, she, her, hers, and I carry the legacy and namesake of my grandparents and great-grandparents. My identities include cisgendered Filipina mestiza woman. I'm a first-generation community college graduate, and I've lived as a parent of scholars in our district for the last 11 years. I've served our community as a human services professional and a workforce educator for over 24 years. I left the commissioned role as the vice chair of the City of Tukwila Equity and Social Justice Committee because the community has called upon ways to improve racial and educational justice in our district. Racial and educational justice are the leadership lenses used when centering and elevating the cultural wealth and brilliance of all Tukwila students, families, and improving all aspects of our district. Director reports are how we directors share with the community how we are serving you as elected officials. It is a time to share how each of us are impacting policy development in our district and how we advocate in collaboration with scholars, families, community-based organizations, local and state governments. We report on educational and regional trends. Lost my their best and current best practices as educational leaders. We center and elevate the brilliance of our scholars, families, and the district. Moreover, we are responsible for hiring and evaluating the superintendent throughout the year. I was in Mexico with my family during the August report, so I will be sharing both August and September reports tonight. So to begin with, had the opportunity to be part of the Best Starts for Kids Liberated Village Community Partner meeting, in which there were families and students from 30 plus community partner programs in South King County. And some of the themes and family community members that were shared there was that this type of programming that's being done in our community helped avoid the school to jail pipeline of our children. Families and educators and community partners experience solidarity, that they believe that they were breaking the intergenerational oppression, that students and scholars were introduced and encouraged to have an entrepreneurial mind. Students create programs. So the students were creating the programs and part of that leadership. Recognizing that we want our children to become the next generation of role models, that students were becoming more independent and with the lens of being helpful in the community, that people, families and students felt encouraged. They realized that they had access to resources and opportunities, increased self-esteem, purpose, the recognition of Black and Brown role models, and that community members and students were sharing that they were not feeling like they were the only ones. There were positive role models, the idea around succeeding and then you serve, inclusion and representation in all fields, and the way that this group did their community evaluation was utilizing YASO's cultural wealth model. That's what I recognize as it was happening. And for anyone who's not familiar with YASO's cultural wealth model, it is an excellent model to help each other think about how we're looking at and how we view our the wealth in our communities. So that was one meeting. Attended a dual credit and high school legislative session in which there were 18 directors. There was Representative Paul, Representative April Berg, and there was an OSPI policy rep there. And really at the state level, they're urging local school districts to organize their programs so that we are enabling students to move successfully from school to careers. So having that as part of that language of what we're doing right from the get-go, K-12, actually pre-K-12. And so recognizing that we want to make sure that our students are moving successfully to careers, the military, technical training programs, and colleges or universities. We should be involving the business community in our district so that we are aware of what those essential skills are. Without including them, how can we do that? And really recognizing that that access to dual credit opportunities in high schools are going to be a priority area. So like in terms of how districts get evaluated through ESSA, this is part of it. I attended the next meeting that I was part of. I attended an OSPI meeting where they were doing English language learner standards framework. And there was an overview. There's about 50 of these trainings happening. They started back in the spring. They're still happening. And so really looking at a framework that all educational professionals can know about and utilize to really serve our English language learners in the classroom. Sometimes people think it's just those who identify as English language learners, but the truth is our students come into all different classes. And so I share some resources there for you, and OSPI's dual language initiative as well. Attended the Mastery-Based Learning State Initiative meeting. And so Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos and Senator Wellman were part of that, and really looking at other ways to do evaluation and assessment than the traditional ways, creating new pathways for our students in which, you know, if it's a portfolio, if it's demonstrated skills in different ways, recognizing that our current school system is, of course, outdated, and what we need is a school system that is ready for the economy and current society. And so this also can create individualized pathways for students. students. So when you think about inclusion and equity, here's an excellent example of how we can integrate this into how we're doing assessment and evaluations in our district. The next thing is the Professional Educational Standards Board. And so this group has been doing work for the last 4 months. And this group formed after Senate Bill 5044 was passed by the legislature in April. And this bill is really looking at making sure that our educators are competent to serve all of our students wonderfully. And so what it did was started with community listening sessions, different community members. I participated in those community listening sessions, getting to hear from community members about when it comes to competencies around equity, diversity, inclusion. Our current competencies are 10 years old and out of date. We need to really update kind of the current field of education and what we should be doing. And so that group sort of moved on into a work task force, and so had a chance to be part of that task force with 55 other educators, community members, and EDI leaders in the state. Principal Fremstead was a representative from Tukwila, so I want to give her props for being recognized in our state as an EDI leader. And then also Principal Fremstead also, I just also want to note that Principal Fremstead was nominated and a finalist from the Washington Association of School Principals. So she was nominated by colleagues across the state in recognition of the work that she does. So I just want to thank her. Okay, so go ahead and scroll down. This model is a model that's representing the current drafting of those educator standards. So as you can see, there's the educator identities, awareness, identities, and biases, developing healthy relationships, culturally responsive communication, empowering climate and culture, concepts for racial justice, and then dismantling injustice and oppression. And one thing that was really interesting that sort of came out of this is it's not just our educator training programs, it's current educators in terms of thinking about what professional development they need, but also school boards and superintendents, right? All our admin as well should have competency in this when we're designing programs, writing policy, making decisions and such. Go ahead and move on. Thanks, Deb. The Urban Native Education Alliance is a combination of urban indigenous peoples groups here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, King County. And so I wanted to share a few events that are happening with them. So they offer, and we've had students here in Tukwila participate through this. I've even seen pictures on the website, by the way. And so this is actually an entity that's a resource available to our district families who identify as urban Native American folk. And so there's the website. Saturday the 16th, they're going to have the Spirit Walk and Warrior Run. And this year's theme is Land Back, the movement to restore land, language, ceremony, kinship, and medicines to Indigenous peoples. Another thing that they're going to be doing October 3rd, and it's open, it's a Zoom presentation. There's going to be a reading and presentation with the author of Sassy Sassafras, a Two-Spirit story. All children deserve the dignity and respect. Our Two-Spirit children are beautiful and sacred. Together we can remember their place in our homes, hearts, and villages. And so that's something that, just as an example, those are a couple things happening in the next couple of weeks. They do basketball league, they do a tutoring, they do classes for credit on Indigenous histories here in the Pacific Northwest. They do a lot. Go ahead and move on. Tukwila Children's Foundation, they've been busy too. One of our Tukwila students, Alexis Mabru, just completed an internship in which she was interviewing and talking with families in the Tukwila elementary community. And so, and is developing a report that she'll be sharing, as far as I know, with at least the board and the superintendent, as well as I'm sure there'll be other community folks that'll be interested. Tukwila Children's Foundation currently has 4 fall internship opportunities. And so just want to spread the word if there's anyone listening here that knows foster students that might be interested in an internship opportunity to work with an amazing group of community leaders that's out there. Some things that are impacting are just today, some current work. So the foundation funded $7,500 to the Tukwila Food Pantry, $2,500 to the Somali Health Board for their soccer program, $1,000 to Stillwaters to support their oodles of noodles and campaign for those weekend snack packs, $1,000 to the Foster Drama Club to support bringing a bilingual production of Romeo and Juliet, and $1,500 to support food services for the Foster football team. And so far have raised over $40,000 for the Maple Crest Fire Fund. So I've got information there if you'd like to learn more about the foundation. The next group, the Supporting Partnerships in Education and Beyond, formerly known as the Somali Parents and Education Board. So they are getting up and running as well. Attended a meet and greet last Saturday out at Ingle Lake with parents and community members from let's see, there was Highline, Tukwila, Renton, Kent, Federal Way that was there, and then North Thurston counties. And so there will be parent groups starting up, parent networks. There is a Tukwila network. I do plan on being part of that Tukwila network. So I just want to encourage and invite all family folk who would like to be part of that or learn more. Charisse Rowe is an amazing professional and is the point person who can tell you more if you've got concerns. She's the point person to contact. And then finally, the City of Tukwila Equity and Social Justice Commission, it has openings for students on the commission. So if there are any foster students who would like to be part of local government policy and local government transformation, there's contact information there. Naisha Fort Brooks is the point person. And so you could contact her. I'm sorry, I did not put their phone number or email, but you could go to the city or contact me and I can go ahead and connect you. And that's what I've got. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bridget. Very complete report. Thank you for all that you're doing. Dave.
Thank you. So a few things here. I had a meeting with Aaron Garcia, who's the legislative representative on the Highline School Board. So it was good to sit down and kind of compare notes about, he's relatively new. So it was interesting to kind of, obviously we're have a lot of things in common, and hopefully we'll be able to work together more as time goes on. It's interesting to note that Highline, along with 3 other school districts in the Roadmap region, that will be getting new superintendents this year. So Susan Enfield, who's the longtime superintendent in Highline, is moving on after this year. So we'll have lots of new superintendents in our area in the next year or so. The other thing I wanted to mention was a couple of recent Foster High School graduates are running this year for the Tukwila City Council. So it was interesting, one of them was a former student representative on the school board for a number of years and for a couple of years. And then another one, both of them went on to the University of Washington and graduated. And the other one was down at the University of Washington Tacoma and was their student body president, and did a lot of really nice work down there in getting housing put together for students experiencing homelessness. So it's great to see the graduates of this district getting actively involved in our local government. So it was also, I guess, a week and a half or so ago, it was great I went out to the Foster High School football game. It was great to see. There was a lot of people in the stands. The cheer squad was there, the pep band, football team. So it was great to start to get some things back to, turn off my phone there, get things back to the situation before we had COVID. So, and I understand they won their following game. So that was great to see that. I did want to mention something that's upcoming at the end of October. is the WASDA, the School Directors Association Legislative Assembly, or General Assembly, as they're calling it these days. And what goes on there is that we end up voting, there's representatives from all the school districts around the state, and end up voting on the legislative positions and resolutions that that WASDA will use in their lobbying efforts. So the question has been, in the past year or two, there's two things that go on there. One is kind of voting on individual issues, and I think there's about 60 of them this year. If you're interested in getting the details, it's on the WASDA website under General Assembly Handbook. It's about a 130-page document that I've been through and lists all the individual items and what they're about. And most of them from year to year, are pretty, unanimous. People, it gets voted through, but there's always a few that can be controversial. So in the past, recent years, I've gone down there and done the voting, and then the other thing that happens is the positions are ranked. The top 15. Everybody gets to put their top 15 in. Now, and so I bring it to the group this year. If people want to get, if other folks want to get involved in this, there's a couple of ways we can do it. One is you can just let me do it. But the other thing is we can talk about any of the issues, some of the issues that you want to talk about, and if you want to, advise, and we can vote on whether I should vote for or against it or whatever. And the nice thing was there's a board member down in Tumwater who, this, as I said, this book is typically what's get published, so it's like a 130-page book, so it's kind of onerous to go through it all. But what they created, this board member in Tumwater, was kind of a nice Excel spreadsheet, which lists all the items and lists their titles and kind of whether they're new ones or old ones and what the category is. So I will send that spreadsheet out to everybody, and you can think about, you can go down and look through the list. And as I said, if there's any details, I think, yeah, she even includes there the page number in the handbook if you wanted to find out more details. And what I'll do then is at the next meeting, we'll put an agenda item on, and if there's any of them that people want to, delve into in greater depth and talk about, and I also send out how I voted for the top 15 last year. Now this year, there's always some difference, but a lot of them are the same. And so if you want to give me any direction on voting or whatever. So I don't know, I guess I just need a little thumbs up or head nod. Do people want to go ahead and do that? Get some, as opposed to just not, okay, I see some. Okay, good. Okay, so we'll do that, and then we can decide next meeting how, there's some, we could spend hours and hours going through each one. You probably don't want to do that, but at least, we can look at the at ones that you might have an interest in and talk about them and discuss them in that way. Okay, so I will do that, and we'll talk about that next. The General Assembly itself is at the October 29th and 30th, so it's at the end of October. So we'll have time in case we want to get into any depth on any of those things. The next thing, yeah, so I've talked about trying to get Representative Hackney, who was interested in talking with us about our legislative positions as well as mental health issues. So I've been trying to get that set up. Finally got some dates from his legislative assistant, which I sent out, I think, to Dr. Herndon and Director Poe-Ryder. Dr. Herndon, do you have we got any indication as to whether one of those dates will work for us, or you need a little more time, or?
Not yet. I'm hoping to get that wrapped up this week.
Okay. Yeah, just let me know. That way I can get back to his legislative assistant. We can get that set up, and then we can work on kind of the details of what we want to talk about with him. He did come, we did have a meet, he came up to Foster High School again for a tour with some of the folks from OSBI who, you know, were looking at new building construction and things of that nature. So it was great because he got to see the building occupied. The last he was up for a tour before, but that was before there was any students in the building. So that was good. I also wanted to mention, so we had the state auditor did our audit every year, and this year we had the audit exit and came up with a completely clean audit. And I think in the 14 years I've been here, maybe one other time did we have a totally complete audit. So congratulations to the business office folks and everybody who was involved in the audit. So I also attended a meeting on the King County Promise. So what's going on with that? This is money that the state has allocated to King County. The revenue source is basically the sales tax on the Sound Transit projects to be used for educational purposes. And so King County, the council is managing this process. And the King County Promise is eventually going to be something where you know, students will get their at least 2 years of college paid for. And they're just starting the process to figure out how to allocate that money. And the first go round is going to be, they're going to take some grant proposals from districts, CBOs, and colleges, and preferably what they're saying is combinations. So I think the first year, so like 2022, there will be a limited number of those kind of pilot projects. And so they're hosting some get-togethers in September to help people, i.e. school districts and colleges, to put together their proposals and help them, you know, submit good grants for their consideration of the money for the first round. So hopefully it's what they're looking for, I think, is combinations of, and not just a school district, but school district maybe and a CBO and a college or something, or multiple colleges. So hopefully we can, you know, maybe get in there with a proposal. I don't know whether it'd be us with Highline or South Seattle. I know, you know, South Seattle has for a couple of years now been looking to us. It's actually the South Seattle College Foundation that has been looking to include Foster graduates in a program that would automatically fully fund their 2 years at South Seattle College. And I don't know where that's been kind of on and off, and I don't know that we've fully engaged with them yet, but I don't know. Do you know, Dr. Herndon, do you know where we are on that?
No, the group that I had co-chaired with the surrounding colleges and universities, but kind of interesting. I actually was just inquiring with the Puget Sound ESD superintendent because it had been run out of there, and it would bring together superintendents and college presidents about 3 or 4 times a year to discuss things like the King County Promise and admissions and a couple of other things. So, but the person who was leading that up, who was kind of the coordinator to that, left PSESD. So I'm trying to figure out where we are with that. But it kind of waned. There became a time where a lot of the college presidents wouldn't show. So it's difficult to have the conversations and move things along. But it's something I think we're hoping to get back in and getting those meetings again. But right now, I don't know where we are with that.
Yeah, you might check up with actually Jenny Standard, because I think she had said that South Seattle had sent some the foundation, you know, this is not Seattle College itself, but the foundation had sent something to her because there's board members in the past who were trying to get Foster accepted as essentially one of the schools like Seattle, where you get the Seattle Promise. So anyway, you might, and I think she was yeah, trying to figure out where that was. So you might just check with her, find out where that is. And because that's been ongoing for a few years. I remember talking to a board member a couple of years ago that were interested in that. So anyway, that's good for the future promise that hopefully a lot of our students could get at least 2 years of college paid for in that method or some other method. Let's see. I also did want to bring up again a little bit the subject of financial education. The whole issue of helping our students to, analyze, and students and families to analyze these different financial offers that come from various colleges and universities, and the whole issue of debt that students are getting into and how to avoid it and how to make decisions about, where to go, maybe take a lot of the opportunities, apprenticeships and different things. And going through all that process is not trivial these days at all. And I was, a while ago, I had researched with a state group, the financial education group at the state level, and there is actually a statewide standard for financial education K-12. And one of the things I'm curious about is whether, in this district, we have implemented those financial education standards. My understanding is that they're not required. And so I'm just curious, and if it would be helpful. I don't believe there's any policy that says that we have to implement that, but something like, I don't know. I'm just interested in that whole area of financial education. And I know a lot of our students bring that up frequently as well, that they really want to know. I mean, it's not just the college entrance, but, mortgages and the whole thing. So I don't know, Dr. Herndon, do we know whether we have implemented those financial education standards at the state level, or we're looking at them, or?
That I'm not quite aware of, but we can always take a look at what we have on priorities every year, and what the wants are for the students, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, it keeps coming up with students. I mean, for obvious reasons, they're very interested in that. And I was listening to somewhere that like LA Unified School District has a good college or a good financial literacy program. So anyway, there's lots of resources, and plus we have a lot of resources around us, BECU and the various credit unions and junior achievement. So there's many resources available around us that we can take advantage of. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. That's a lot. Good work. Edna is going to pass on report tonight. She's had illness in her household that has kept her busy. And so we will hope that all of that resolves soon. For my report, it's been an active couple of weeks, but the things I would like to highlight, I'm reading 2 books right now, which they're in the car. I had meant to bring them and for show and tell. One of them is called Street Data, a Next Generation Model for Equity, Pedagogy, and School Transformation by Shane Safar and Jamila Dugan. I really enjoy it, enjoying this book because it reminds us that the data that we often work off of, the test scores, are described as satellite data, looking at the whole thing, and that street data then is the narrative that supports that. And for me, the narrative tells us a whole lot about that data, and I think we can build a stronger system of getting that narrative so that we understand the data and can figure out how to move with that data. The other one I'm reading is Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies Teaching and Learning for Justice in a Changing World by Django Paris and Sammy Alim. This one is goes a lot along with what Ms. Chen is doing with translanguaging and looking at how we have a tendency to deny multicultures in our school systems, and how we can build that back in so that all of what our scholars bring to school is seen as an asset rather than a deficit. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to bring some of the learnings in, just like all of us when we read some new things can bring them in. One of the other things that I just wanted to highlight, well, I did want to say second the brava for the finance department on the audit. That is just amazing. I am so proud of what Veronica and your team, what you have done. That's amazing. I also want to mention the football team. They did win last week. It was not a game they expected to win, but they have come together as a team in an amazing way. I want to give a shout out to Coach Gio, who is pulling them together. And I only know all of this because he brings the team up to the Tukwila Pantry every Saturday after practice, and they work in the pantry for an hour and a half. They also get fed, so that's a good motivation. But if you saw the video from last week, they moved a carport, and it was amazing to see all of these purple shirted guys carrying this carport across the parking lot. I really want to give them a shout out for how they're working together and learning to support one another, and for what Coach Gio is doing. I also want to raise a concern in that he says he's got quite a few boys on the team that have not been able to get their physicals because their families just haven't been able to arrange that. And so I'm working on seeing if I can get a physician or a nurse practitioner to come out and do those physicals on site so that those young men can play in a game. They show up for practice every day, but then they don't get to play because they don't have physicals. So we'll see if we can make that happen. The last thing that I would mention is we are still looking for a junior student rep, a student rep from the junior class. We have a senior class rep who has not been able to join us. We need to figure out how to make that work better, but we don't have our junior rep yet. So if someone has anyone that they would like to help bring on board for that, we need our students to be bringing their voices in also. And I believe that's the end of my report. So we will move to our consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, if you are in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 If you are opposed, say no. All right, the consent agenda is approved. And we'll move on to the questions only presentations. I know that I have some questions for B. Anyone have any questions for A or C?
Yeah, I've got one for A.
Okay,
I have one for A, B, and C.
okay, all right. So Bridget, you want to go first on the A question?
Yeah. So just a little bit of background to this question. About almost a year ago, about 9 months ago, was contacted by Representative Bergquist asking what is happening in Tukwila and why aren't we spending our ESSER funds? And at the time, I think we were around the 17, we had only spent, it was like maybe 13%, 17%. And he was comparing our district to the other districts he he represents. And he was concerned because if we weren't spending the money, his concern was, you know, how am I supposed to advocate for more money? What's going on? And I had no answers. And then just so kind of bring you to where we are now, in terms of looking at how we compare to other districts in the state, right now, I think we're at about the bottom 15% of spend out compared to our districts here in Washington. So we still are far behind. And I just think as a board, I would like us to be better informed of, you know, how much money's coming in, how are we spending it, and what's the game plan? Because this is a great opportunity to really do some transformative, if it's safety work in the district with HVAC systems. I serve on the King County, it's for purchases. It's like I get to oversee what all the school districts are buying in the state, and there's districts that are buying a lot right now, like for HVAC and different types of things. And I kind of look to see where Tukwila is on that as well, and we don't really measure up on that either. And so it's a year later, and we're still very low on the spending as compared to other districts. And I'm really concerned. So I don't know if Ms. Birdsong or Dr. Herndon has, and maybe it's not even tonight, maybe it's a presentation that talks about how, you know, what's going on with ESSER and what are we hoping to do with it. That's all.
Yeah, I think we'll be making a future presentation on that.
Okay, well, I will put that on our agenda list.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe like when I hear from Representative Berquist or other folks who are asking those questions, you know, why is our district looking that way? Who's the point person I can direct them to?
Yeah, they can talk to me if you'd like to.
Okay.
Thank you, Bridget, for those questions. Anything else on A from you, Bridget?
That is it.
I had an additional question. Earlier, we were kind of reassured that we would have additional support with counselors and social workers in buildings, and that maybe the ESSER funds would be spent with using that. But I'm seeing that it doesn't appear that we have more than we did previously. Am I wrong in that thinking?
Erin, is that something you can respond to as far as staffing and the numbers of personnel for counselors and mental health professionals?
For sure. Yes. Hello. Good evening. And I know that Jennifer Jones can also step in because I know she was instrumental in helping with this last spring. But yes, so we have added an additional social worker at Showalter Middle School and Foster High School. And we did that last spring.
And
So we
did
have,
lose
yeah, and I
counselors
think
there?
that was a response to a question that came to the health and safety team.
Yeah.
That's in the packet. Mhm.
It did, but now it says that Showalter has 2 counselors and 1 social worker, and that Foster has 2
Yeah.
counselors and 1 social worker. What were the numbers last year?
So
Foster
I-
has
Sorry,
3.
3 counselors plus career counseling. So what we've added, just to be clear, what we've added are the 2 social workers at the secondary level.
Is that enough at this particular time?
I would want to make sure that the principals are included in responding to that. Yeah, for sure.
Is that a conversation
For
that
sure.
could be held? Because if we've got ESSER funds, I can't think of a better way to use them than to
Sure.
service our students and staff.
As one strategy, for sure.
So the funding source for the social worker at Showalter and Foster, is that ESSER dollars, or what was the funding source for those?
Yes, they are funded out of ESSER.
What were they funded out of before?
They weren't. I believe they are
Yeah.
additions.
They didn't exist before.
Right.
But if, how many counselors at Foster did we have before?
I believe
3
you always-
counselors.
And how many do we have now?
Plus a career college. Right, we haven't added, just to be clear, right, we have not added counselors, we've added social workers
One.
at the secondary level, 2, 1 at each building.
We've
middle-
lost,
the middle
we've
school.
lost one counselor. We're down one counselor, correct? No, I thought we had
That's
3
not
counselors.
correct.
Oh, okay. I thought we had 3 counselors at the high school.
You are correct with that.
Yeah, the answer in the document here was correct. It was incorrect. It says Foster High School, 2 counselors, there's really 3.
And is one of those the career?
No,
Oh, okay. So there are still 3 counselors.
yes.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
I guess I would really like that looked into because I know that it was challenging before with 3 counselors. And I can't imagine adding 1 social worker having an impact, but could they use additional personnel?
Gotcha.
And I have one more question. I've noticed starting last year through district communications of other districts that those districts created like community decision-making groups on how we should use ESSER funds. What are the needs in our district? So it's been a community conversation in terms of determining how to use those funds. What are the community needs that weren't just coming from the district office or principals? And so my question would be, why can't we do something like that here in Tukwila? It would be a great opportunity. It's way past overdue because now those districts have been doing this for almost a year now. I just would wonder if that came up in any of the leadership conversations as a best practice in terms of determining what we're doing with the money now and what we should be doing with the money moving forward.
Yes, actually, the decision to add the 2 social workers was responsive to several conversations that were held with members of the district staff. And that was a responsive strategy at that time last spring. And that was not a decision that was made in isolation by administrators or by building principals, but yeah. So I think that's a
Aaron,
good starting point. Yeah.
Aaron, were there students and families and community-based organizations part of that conversation too?
No, they weren't part of that particular conversation.
Yeah, I think that's part of the whole race and equity toolkit discussion, as well as getting community members and students involved in these discussions, which we currently, I mean, there are actually some structures around the district that have those folks involved, but you know, getting more of these kinds of decisions into there. I mean, I agree with Director Poe-Ryder on that issue.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's a growing edge that we really need to lean into. And if that means writing it on our office wall to remind us to look outside and involve some more people, I think that's where we need to be moving toward. Dave, you have some questions on A?
Yeah, I just to, I'll get to that just a second. Just to repeat, I think we have, you know, between the steering together committee, the, you know, PTAs, the student clubs, there's a lot of the Tukwila Children's Foundations. There's a lot of groups that we could tap to kind of help in that process if you're looking for things. The question I had on the finance, so this is for our CFO. I was a little confused in the update that you gave us to the questions under expenditure, that sheet. It talks about ESSER is included in current programs. Now, if I'm understanding this this negative $1.3 million in expenditures, you're taking it out of expenditures? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, so what happened is that the ESSER dollar line that was originally there for the 1.3 million was also included in the individual programs. So one of two ways to look at this, I could have subtracted them from each of the program, because remember, ESSER 1 never had its own program code, such as like ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which is 1200 or 13XX. So we had to use a different way to account for those, and that was done through a project code. So so ESSER funds is split between program 97, 0100, 21. So it's already encompassed in our current programs. Another way to have done that is to subtract from those actual programs and then put the dollar amount down in ESSER. So that was another way to do it. But I just didn't want both amounts to be accounted for, because it's not correct.
Yeah, I guess that was my concern, because with this correction, then the fund balance went up. Now, ESSER dollars should not impact the fund balance at all, correct?
Correct, but it was double counted for, right? Because the 1.3 was its own line item.
Okay,
And then the 1.3 was already encompassed in the programs, and I didn't want the number to be inflated, right? I want, transparency. So,
yeah, I just want to make sure we weren't bumping our fund balance up because of ESSER dollars, because you can't do that. Yeah. Okay.
no, that's correct. So when I
Alright.
run my budget status report, the ESSER dollars are already there in the program. And again, we haven't quite closed our books, so the numbers are going to change again.
Okay. The other question I wanted to have was under the revenue side. So you took out 948,000 from food service. Well,
Correct.
Can you explain that?
Yes, so the original projection, I want to say, was around it was around 1.5, 1.6, based upon what we thought we were going to get in funding for the meals, but everything we still continued on the waivers. And so we were only able to get like the summer program funding, and it ended up coming to around close to $800,000. So I had to make that adjustment.
Okay, so this is saying, I want to understand this a little bit. So there was an original projection, obviously I was done in the budget, for how much we were going to get from food service. And it turns out we got significantly less.
Correct.
Now explain, why did we get?
Because of the waivers, right? Because we're not getting any of the state dollars, like the local dollars, the state dollars. So the waivers kept going, but it doesn't right size what we're owed based on meal service. We didn't have enough meals served to create the revenue, if that makes sense.
Oh, I see. So, okay, we're getting funded based on the number of meals. So it's kind of like on a per student. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thanks on that one.
All right, let's move on to the school safety plan. Dave, let's start with your questions this time.
Okay, I guess this is just for my understanding a little bit here. Is the way I'm understanding is that the King County Health Department has determined that the school districts should do contact tracing. That's always kind of bothered me, number one, because we don't have anybody that's trained to do that. And I'm just curious from from an advocacy point, does the King County Health Authority have the authority to tell school districts to spend money on things, that we do have, of course, the ESSER dollars coming, that can, I think, legitimately be spent for that. But my concern is kind of, do we have, my understanding of contact tracing is that it does require some, expertise and training to do it properly. So I don't know, can anybody give me a little education about how school districts got on the hook for doing contact tracing?
Yeah, I can have someone else talk maybe a little bit about what it entails, but this is a complaint from every district superintendent. So it's an unfunded mandate, which is not atypical coming from the state. And it's just a requirement. So they didn't provide that piece. It is chewing up an incredible amount of bandwidth, and it's stretching everybody thin. So it's, we're not the only ones by any stretch of the imagination. We're just like every other district in the state having to do this. But we are trying to find some people who can help out. A lot of it is the calls that go with it. It doesn't have to be a registered nurse who does the contact tracing. So we can hire people to do it once they know what it is that they need to do.
Okay, so it's just probably a topic to bring up with our legislators, because like you say, everybody in the state has the same issue. So it's just weird how that came down. Okay.
Well, follow up on that one. Did the health department give training on that?
That I don't know. I think they just talked about what contact tracing was.
Okay.
And then just said, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, I don't think it could be done by an outside agency, because you have to be able to see who was in that close contact.
Right.
It really comes down to the teachers mostly being able to, or the paras being able to talk about who was there.
Yeah.
But you did somewhere in there, it did report that we had two extra staff working on this now. Are they, is that what they're assigned to, is the contact tracing piece of it? Or where are they? What schools are they at? Is that, Aaron, is that something you know?
Yes, and I would invite Hannah Maestro to also add on to this, but yeah, that is correct. So we've got Hannah as the district's COVID point person and the lead facilitator for contact tracing, and then her team, right, the health team at each of the sites supports it. We do have 2 RNs. Go ahead, Hannah.
Yes, this is correct. So whenever we do get a case, I'll get in contact with the school administrators as well as the school nurse, and then we'll work together to determine who is exposed to the student, whether it be through the classroom or through lunch, through PE, and then that's how we kind of contact trace. For the younger students, the elementary students especially, they're a bit harder to contact trace because they tend to kind of mingle and sometimes a mask slip, and so that's always a concern. And so what we end up doing with the younger kiddos is we quarantine entire classrooms, and that's proved to be very beneficial because we're cutting the cases off at the source, whereas in middle school and in high school, students are a bit more they're more adaptable, and they're able to kind of follow that 3 feet social distancing, and they're able to wear their masks better. So in terms of contact tracing for older kids, we would ask for seating charts of every single period that they're in, and then we'll contact trace, and we'll pay attention to the closest radius to the student and who would be within that 3 feet. And then that's when we would contact the parents and talk about vaccination status and symptoms, and then quarantine dates if need be.
So thank you. So my question was more about your staffing. So you have a nurse at each school.
Sorry, yes.
And you have 2 extra staff doing this now, 2 full-time staff, or do you just have the nurses at the schools and yourself?
It would be just me and the school nurses, but then if we ever do need help, Erin and Jennifer also hop in. I'm not so sure, Erin, if that's something that you could hop in on.
Yes, we do have it. I mean, the report today said the district has 2 additional registered nurses to staff, on staff to support. 2 additional made me think that was more than the school nurses. So did I read that incorrectly?
Yeah, it would just be myself and the school nurses.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So we have not hired extra people to do contact tracing or COVID. Okay. I think
We
we
have.
all agree we should. We have,
Yeah,
Erin?
so, yes, Hannah's position
Okay,
is an additional hire. Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And we have yes, and we have another RN at another registered nurse at Thorndike Elementary that we added in.
And
But
so
she-
Hannah is not the high school nurse? No?
Correct,
No.
Okay.
correct.
All right. Sorry, I had missed that we had a different person there. I thought you were doing it all, Hannah. All right, Dave, you want to continue with your questions?
Yeah, so I guess just to finish up on that last one, so the revenue source for the 2 new, Hannah and the other person, is ESSER dollars, is that correct?
Hannah's the only new person.
Okay, and she's being paid out of ESSER dollars?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so my next question has to do with the walk to school maps that were part of this health, school safety plan. And I'm concerned about a couple of them. One is the Thorndike Elementary map shows the safe route from Tuckwell International Boulevard on South 152nd down to 42nd Avenue South. And that, I mean, I've been on that road and there is no sidewalk on that road. All there is a white stripe painted on the side of the road. So there's no separation, which, our safety policy talks about, separation within 1 mile. And I think there's a thing in there about some kind of separation is what we're looking for. And the reason I'm concerned about that particular street is that at the end of that street close to Tuckwell International Boulevard is where the Bellwether apartments are in, and they're scheduled to be occupied starting next month. And there's 103 units up there, and about half of them are the 2 and 3 bedrooms. So I've heard estimates, on the high side of maybe 150 school-age children in that building, 50 maybe on the low side, but there's going to be a lot of students potentially coming out of that building. And to have them walking down South 152nd Street, I think is not a good situation at all. And so there's, I guess, a couple of things. One is, it seemed like a safer route would be actually from that location would be to go up to International Boulevard and then down South 150th Street, which actually does have a sidewalk all the way down to Thorndike. So that, would be seems like would be a better approach initially. And or, potentially sending a bus to get them. I mean, that's kind of what the policy is. If we can't, if there's not a safe way for them to get to walk to school within the 1 mile, then we would send a bus. But and the other area, I think we really should be advocating with the city. I don't know what the city's plans are for that street, whether, putting sidewalks on that street are on their list at all. But I'd certainly be willing to go down, and I don't know, maybe Dr. Herndon, when you meet with the mayor, you can see if, where that, I'd be interested in knowing, is that even on their radar? I mean, if it's not, I'm more than happy to go down to the city council meeting and talk about that, because that's going to be, I think, a big problem when we got that many school-age children trying to get to school from there. So that's my first concern on that map. The other concern with the map is the issue It's on the Foster and Showalter Middle School one. And the issue is South 144th, the bridge across I-5. So that has been an issue that's been brought up by community members, by the school for a number of years. And the problem, of course, is that the walking surfaces are separated, but they're way too thin. So it's not safe for, more than one person to be running. And we have a lot of students that walk across that bridge every day. And the other thing I'm concerned about is the barrier between on the edges of the bridges. So it's interesting, when Sound Transit came through and put in their rail tracks under that bridge, they put up what I would consider to be, state-of-the-art barrier. I mean, you can't get over that barrier, but the rest of the bridge is not the barrier. I mean, somebody could have an accident and fall onto I-5, which would not be good. So that's another one that I would not consider that to really be a safe thoroughfare. And I've not heard, that's another one I'd be really interested in what the city is looking at on that. Is that on their list? Whose responsibility is that? I assume it's the city, but it's over a state highway. And the other thing is if they're looking for some dollars, then maybe and it's a state issue, then we should be advocating with Representative Hackney maybe to get some state funding in the capital dollars to fix that, so it's a safe crossing. So anyway, those are my two concerns about the walking routes that I don't think they're safe, and so I'm interested in kind of what school district approach to that is, and then what we can do at the city or state level to get that fixed. So there's a question somewhere in there. I don't know, Aaron, if you have some feedback on that and give me some idea about maybe what's been done or what hasn't been done or what makes sense to go ahead with.
Sure. And for this, I think I'd invite Susie Kelly. She was helpful in this part of the presentation.
Thank you, Aaron. So your timing is spot on, Director Larson. Every 2 years, we reassess our walk paths. And so this year, we were just starting to put our committee together, myself and Maria Edwards, and I will start the process of reviewing the walk paths and in consideration your two largest concerns here. Once we compile all of that information, we will be sharing it out to community members that we invite, the board of directors, perhaps representatives from each school, et cetera, et cetera. There's a very wonderful book that the state puts out called School Walk Routes and Student Pedestrian Safety. It's basically a guidelines of how to review the safety. It's very intense. I'm looking forward to doing it. I haven't ever actually walked through the entire process myself. So I'm anxious to walk through it, learn as much as I can, and to help improve the safety for our walking students. So I look forward to collecting that data for you. I know that I have an in at the city and can express our concerns there and get some of the answers that you've expressed needing. So it's a start.
I would say also typically the addition of sidewalks is something cities typically impose on the developer. So if they haven't done that, they're probably not adding it themselves because they pass that cost on to the developers. But we can inquire to see if they have any future projects there. And the yield rate, we'll see. I think 100 would be pretty high. The typical yield rate, even with multifamily, maybe at the high side, might be 30%. So there may be 30 students, K-12 total, coming out of there, but we don't really know, just because a lot of that yield rate and occupancy is also based a lot on current availability of housing and pricing and all that. So some of the older models that we may have been looking at could probably, they could be different given the current status of King County occupancy and cost of housing. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
I'd also like to add to what Dr. Herndon just said, and that is, I did drive that path last night on the way home and did see that there is sidewalk being constructed in front of that new building. I noticed it as that far. The crosswalk would lead across, headed north on Tukwila International Boulevard. And Dave, I love your suggestion of coming down to 150th and a safe walk path down. That could be an easy amendment to our map to show a safe walk path, educate our children, and then also promote for them a group walking to school. So there's a lot that can be done for promoting safety to the kids and the parents.
Yeah, I agree. I get a little hesitant when you talk about putting children down Tuckahoe International Boulevard, but it's cleaned up. And the also nice thing about that particular block is it's right across the street from the police station. So that
Right.
makes me feel a little better, although the police station has not been immune from attacks as well. But anyway, yeah, so I'm really interested, particularly, I think that's great. I'm really interested in particularly, if we need to kind of advocate with the city for doing some of this stuff. I understand that, yeah, the city approved the Bellwether, you're right, they put sidewalks right in front of the apartment itself, but not all the way down the street. And so, I think, yeah, I'm really interested because I'd love to go down and advocate for that if there's no plans for doing that. So.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, I have a great working relationship with them. I've asked them
Good.
several times for signage, painting, etc. on certain areas. They virtually respond within a week and it's done.
Excellent, yeah. So let me know what you find out, and if you
I
need
will.
help, I'll be happy to participate. Okay. so
Awesome, thank you.
That's all I got.
Yeah, the new speed signs where the cameras are that are in multiple languages that the city has put up, I just think are amazing. So hopefully you've all seen those, even if you can't read the words.
Well,
know
you
that-
should see the lovely reports that they send when you get dinged by one.
Well, I understand that, but at least the warnings are there in multiple languages, maybe not enough languages, but more than usual. Edna, do you have any questions on the safety report?
No, but I do have one additional question on the COVID thing. Can I go back to that?
Well,
just-
that's part of the safety report. You're
Okay. All right. Are masks being supplied for each classroom?
Yes, and Hannah, go ahead.
Thank
I
you.
saw
Sorry.
you jump on.
Yes, they are. So we ordered a bunch of masks specifically for music students, but usually it's Liliana Cardenas who orders the masks, and the district does provide masks for the students.
So in each classroom, there's a box of masks available?
There should be, yes, and then there's also hand sanitizers and cleaning materials that custodians will put out.
Yeah,
I'm hearing conflicting reports that, there are masks and there aren't masks. So I'm confused, I guess. I just want to make sure that those supplies are readily available to students and staff.
So I mean, in terms of the masks, if students are in need of masks, they can go either to the health room, or there's always masks available throughout the school. And then also for staff members, we have like N95s and face shields available as well for students who cannot wear face masks, and that's if they have a medical condition that inhibits them from wearing a mask. That's all.
I'm wondering if it would just be wise to have every classroom have student-sized masks.
yeah. I was at one of the schools this week, and the lunchroom didn't have masks, and of course the kids accidentally throw their masks away in the lunchroom, and so I was able to find them a box of masks to have in the lunchrooms. But I think I do think that that there is a need for some oversight from what I've seen in the schools. we do need to follow up and make sure that the teachers and the students are in compliance. Because I've seen a lot of it that isn't in compliance, and I worry about that. I worry about the elementary schools in the lunchroom where there is no 3-foot distance, where there is no pod, so you're not always sitting with the same kids. I think we need to really work harder on living up to our expectations.
And you were available to go find those masks, where if they were in each classroom and each station, then people wouldn't have to worry about finding them. Is that
That's right.
possible, Hannah?
That's it. Yeah, and I only went to find them because I saw 2 kids wandering around outside without them. So yeah, this is really hard work to make sure we stay in compliance. And I know the compliance with the isolation room is also a challenge, in that our procedures say that we keep that empty for 24 hours after an exposure, and yet and that doesn't feel feasible when we've got 2 or 3 exposures a day at a school. So I'm wondering, do we rewrite that procedure so we're not meeting our standard? Or I always worry about making a procedure and then not living up to it. Can that be rewritten so that it says this is our hope, or this is the other thing that I didn't see happening was the tables were not wiped down in the lunchroom between groups. So, or the kids were asked to wipe them down, which of course, this is not a kid's skill at that level. So it might be in ordinary times, but probably not in COVID times. So how do we, I know it's up to the principals to manage this, and yet that's a big task. So I don't know how we ensure that we're keeping our kids safe and our staff.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I
you
think
have.
those are all good feedback, and we'll talk to principals about that. That's their primary responsibility, and they can figure out how to resolve that challenge within their building. So each building may look to do it a little bit differently, but we'll definitely communicate that back to them.
Yeah, because we are getting that feedback from parents. Anything else on the school safety? Oh, I guess I have one more question. I'm sorry. I was a little bit confused in the procedures as they're written. If a staff member is vaccinated and they test positive, they have to quarantine, right?
If the staff member is vaccinated and symptomatic, so if they've begun to feel symptoms of COVID, that's when we would quarantine them and have them test for COVID. But if they're asymptomatic and they're vaccinated, then they can continue coming to work and just continue monitoring for symptoms for the next 2 weeks.
What if they test positive? That's my question.
I see. So if they test positive, they've been vaccinated and they were asymptomatic, then we would perform contact tracing, and depending on whether or not they were in close contact with the students, we would probably have to close down a classroom.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are all really tough decisions. Anything else on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Bridget.
They're follow-up questions to the questions that were submitted earlier. So on slide 3 of the presentation, how can this plan be implemented utilizing the racial equity process without involving communities most impacted by it and without an assessment process? I didn't see an assessment process in terms of how the plan might have unintended impacts and what those might be and how we might mitigate those things. And so the report from the health team was, please acknowledge first that some members of the health team reflect BIPOC community of Tukwila. Collectively, the team is composed of people of color, individuals who are multilingual, a child of a refugee, an individual or more who grew up in low socioeconomic experience, or an individual or more who grew up in a multilingual household, and abolitionist educators. These are gifts that we hold in the lens. So I guess it's not answering my question. I would like to know who in this team represents the people needed in order to have a racial equity process. So whoever answered that question, can you inform me that?
I think it sounds like if you're talking about the COVID teams or the health teams, it sounds like they were mostly responding to the guidance and compliance with King County Department of Health, but we can include family members or students moving forward. But that's what I would think that.
Yeah, so the people who are most impacted by the plan are going to be, you know, community level staff, students, family members. And so in terms of thinking about this plan, a lot of work went into this plan, but how good is this plan if we're not able to make sure that everybody feels confident that they know what the plan is, that they're aware of what to do if something happens. And so that is part of that process. And part of that process, a racial equity process, also builds in how will we keep track of our progress in this? How will we adapt if we need to do this and such? And so I just want folks to really be thinking that, you know, I just would wonder how many people on the team are live in Tukwila and have students in Tukwila.
Once again, this seems to be a growing edge that we bring in local.
Yeah, and really, you know, I ask these questions not for myself. I ask these questions for those people who weren't included in this plan. I ask these questions for our students so that they feel more confident in what they're supposed to do and why they're supposed to do that, and not in terms of, and so, and I really would like to know what the impact is right now for our students and our staff and our families right now. And that's not built into this plan. I'm not hearing about, you know, what's working well, what's not working. This is an unintended consequence that happened that we hadn't planned for. What are we doing there? That's really transparent, honest, reflexive, and that's the type of thing that I would like. I'm a parent. I would like to know, and really, I'm a privileged parent. I read and speak English. I know how to access information. Even though I know how to access information, I still don't know what the information is. And so, you know, this weekend when I was at the meet and greet with a bunch of other families from the community, I heard time and time again that our parents are not going to always go to the website. Being told to go to the website is not effective, and it's also disrespectful and dismissive. So so I would want to know, what's the plan if a family member has a question and the person they trust is the teacher. So they go to the teacher, and if the teacher doesn't know, who does the teacher have to get that answer and be able to be supported if they need that? Or, you know, like that, those kinds of conversations. So I would really like to see a communication plan that is very student, family, and staff centered, and not English speaking, writing centered. That that we are centering other communities that really need, are deserving of so much more acknowledgement and respect and resources. So that's all. Just hoping that, you know, the seeds are being planted here, because they're not just coming from Bridget. I do my best to represent the communities I serve.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, and well, I was just going to follow up by saying I hope that the team was able to convey that information and the responses to the questions, because I think what came out of this was that, you know, when this plan was constructed, those lenses were consulted and those perspectives were included, that the team definitely has a diverse experience and incorporated that into the way that this information and the decisions that are made and how things are communicated out and what resources are used to communicate out and all of those steps. And that is the work and that we're doing every day as a team, in addition to the other responsibilities that we have.
I'm so glad to hear that, Mr. Dragunov. And so, quick question: what's something that's occurring that the team hadn't planned, and how are they responding to it? Just give me an example.
Yeah, so definitely a problem of practice that we have is we are, I think, with just the number of exposure incidents that need to be contact traced, and then the communication trail that we're obligated to follow, right? And making that information accessible to our community who speak a wealth of languages, who have a variety of experiences, who need additional supports, right? It's layered, right? And so we've got we're pulling in social workers, we're pulling in liaisons, we're pulling in food service, right? Transportation, Liliana's team, bringing everybody together. Like, that was not something on this team's radar. I think originally it was, we're going to contact trace, and Hannah will lead that and say, do this. Oh, no. You've got layers that we get to unpack, and that's our approach, right? This is a joy for us. We're able to do this work. So.
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is that that's great problem solving. Let's make sure we have the community involved in the problem solving, so that all the voices are.
Yeah, and I'll end with this. What goes along with that is, once those changes happen and here's what we're doing, I asked the question, it ought to be informed to the community. The community we should be accountable to our community to say, hey, here's what we're doing. Was this, we had new needs, more needs, here's what we're doing now. And so that loop in which our community is involved all along, not just one time when we're putting a plan together, is so needed. And I think it also speaks to our the repair and trust that needs to happen, the repair and communication, the repair and involvement, and respect for all our community members is it's an example of how you do that, right? And so my hope would be is that, I know that we've been asking those hard questions, right? But they're important questions, and I would want everybody in the district to know what we talked about tonight and what we got to hear tonight, because we got privilege and power. And I want everybody that don't have different levels of privilege and power to have just as much access, and to realize they're as important to know this as well.
Thank you, Bridget. And I do think we've only heard half of the conversation tonight. Even with this, we've heard the first part on the procedures on how to identify and notify. We haven't heard the second part, which is how we teach in this context, or how we teach remotely, how those switches are being made between in class, out of class, for individuals or for whole classes. So I'm hoping that possibly that will be on the agenda for our next board meeting, to hear this other side. And maybe that gives us an opportunity to reach out and get some more feedback from the community and from our students about how that part of this COVID experience is happening. All right, are we okay with the school safety plan as we've discussed it?
Just on a real quick side note, I just would like to compliment those people who have stepped up and done the Zoom meetings with classrooms that they aren't normally attached to, but they've been doing a remarkable job doing so.
That's great. And that's a community member, board member, grandma, that's giving us that feedback, huh? All right, let's move on to C. Did we have any questions for the gifted and advanced coursework agenda item?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know how the points of data are being looked at. So let's say there's a student with a Latinx identity, racial identity, taking 3 different classes. Is that student being counted 3 times or just once?
Non-duplicated, just once.
Non-duplicated. So in terms of students in each, so regardless of how many classes they're taking, they're recognized as being part of the program. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one? All right, well, let's move on to action items. Approval of human resources staffing report. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And is there any discussion?
I guess I just share something that I learned. So what we see on this human resources staffing report is positions that are hired as, full-time district staff, and it doesn't include, for example, contractors. So, for example, the two, that was one of the things I was kind of wondering about, was we have a social worker now at Showalter and Foster, and they've never appeared on this. And the reason is because they're contracted out, and since we're using ESSER dollars, it's one-time money, and so they aren't being hired as permanent positions. So that's just something I learned I wasn't aware of before. Just pass it along.
Thank you for that information, Dave. And if there's no further discussion, if you approve this agenda item, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. I heard 4 of them, so that's good on that item. The second one is approval for the purchase of the iReady assessment suite. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And is there any discussion on this one?
I guess I just want to make sure that, part of this is to include the use of iReady at Foster High School, apparently for reading, but not math. I really think, here's an opportunity to, apply our race and equity toolkit to some of these kind of decisions. And I think this is another opportunity that, traditionally, these kinds of things have not been brought to any community members per se, unless they happen to be on the staff. And, for me, discussing things like iReady and how we're doing formative assessments and so forth is an opportunity for a two-way conversation with different members of the community and students, for that matter, as well, about so we need to hear from them about their perspective on the testing and so forth, but we also need to provide some education about why we're doing this and what the benefits are and so forth and so on. So I think this hopefully will be a good opportunity to kind of, that process, ingraining that process of involving community in different decisions as we go through that haven't traditionally had them before is going to be, it's going to be a journey. We're probably not necessarily going to get it right the first time, but we need to start doing it. And this is one area where I'm looking forward to actually seeing how that process work on on this particular issue. So thanks.
So last month, we had a calendar of assessments that we were asked to look at and that the district was going with. And at the time, I had asked who was involved in making these decisions to do testing, and as it was designed for the year. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Baker, I think there was 2 or 3 people in our district that worked on that. Is Mr. Baker here?
Yeah, I'm here. So the explanation was much of this, the state, the windows for testing come to us from either a vendor, the suggestions come from a vendor, or they are dictated by OSPI. So as we get those windows and get that information, we sit down now with buildings and talk about how we're going to deliver those assessments, dates, timelines, people, small groups to provide accommodations. So that's the next step. So a lot of what was presented on that assessment calendar came from outside sources that are dictated / recommendations in some cases. So the next step is do the implementation plan at each building for each assessment that was on that list.
And so the purchase of the new technology is part of how we're going to implement that plan?
Are you referring to iReady?
Yes, this what we're being asked to approve.
Yes, we will continue with iReady, and now we'll have data K-12 on our students.
So another question that I had asked last month was, were you aware of any concerns or complaints or issues in what, how we're doing testing, how it's going? And the answer, the typed answer was that you were not aware of this. And so that is concerning to me because there are challenges with testing in terms of, for instruction and, supporting students and being as successful as they can be. There's, and I hear from students the challenges of testing, of getting frustrated, of different things like that. And so I'm just going to share with this group that I will not approve any assessment, anything, until I know that as part of this process, we are aware and listening and responding to, have a greater understanding of what those community concerns are and what are those things that as we're doing this business for the district, there are people that are impacted by it and they've been part of, we are listening to that, and here's what we're aware of, and here's what's on our radar, and here's what we'd like to do a little differently or to adjust so that more of our students can feel successful, so less of our students get frustrated, that more of our teachers feel supported and like they're able to do what they need to do phenomenally as they do already. And so I just want to kind of let folks know that that's where I'm kind of at in this process. I cannot support assessment in our district until I know. And when we talk about these building discussions, who's in these building discussions? Because I know that oftentimes it could be building leadership, but then how it comes to staff, educators, families, how are they involved other than being told that's how we have to do it? Right? Similar to what I heard about OSPI, we have these limits, right? And so I'd love for us to really encompass language rather than scarcity, that we really look to what we can do so that there is enough for everybody and that we can all do this well. When I ask these questions, it certainly is not to cause problems. I think there's a lot of problems already that we're not talking about and addressing. So I'd love for us to actually have a conversation on how we can do this better.
Sounds good.
And I believe also, just a quick comment, part of the, again, using the race and equity tool doesn't mean that it comes up with a solution for every challenge there. I think as Director of Poet Writer is pointing out, sometimes it's to really illuminate the challenges that we may still be boxed into by state compliance. So we're just calling that out to say, I realize this is state compliance, but this is how it's impacting our students and our families. So it's many times the toolkit is not necessarily the solution, but it's helping to help as Director Larson has said too, to advocate down Olympia for change. So by highlighting some of those challenges, we can surface those challenges.
Yeah, and if we can get the narrative from the individuals impacted, I just think that would be great, that we can add that to what we get from the assessment tools.
So I'm kind of inclined to support Director Poe-Ryder's view. I'm wondering, is this, and what I'm thinking about, so what we're being asked to essentially is to approve the money for this year's suite of iReady. Is there a time urgency on this particular issue? What I'm thinking is, it would be nice to, even if it's just within the next couple of weeks to the next meeting, to, you know, to begin the process of, you know, recognizing some of the concerns about testing, whether it comes from staff or students, or to at least, you know, to kind of start to address Director Poe-Ryder's concern there about, can we at least get those issues out on the table so that we're, you know, kind of understanding. And like I said, I think some of it, you know, it's going to be a two-way conversation. I mean, you know, some of these tests, I mean, they're being done for various reasons, and you can question some of them or not question some of them, but I'm wondering if that would be, because I mean, I hear, yeah, in different groups that I've been in, people have all kinds of issues with testing, and some of them I think are, I mean, they're all good issues. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but to at least get so that we could hear them and start to wrestle with them. Is that something that could be done in the next couple of weeks? And I'm not saying a big, you know, huge initiative, but at least, you know, get some of those, go to a few, you know, teacher areas, and because I know there's a variety of teachers who have things to say about this subject, and some of the students, and just at least illuminate some of the issues.
Yeah, I plan to sit down with each building leadership team, whatever that composition is, and hear the pros and cons of the plan that they've created based on the assessment calendar that's been produced and communicated. I could definitely bring those concerns back to a meeting if that's important to all, as well as the pros. But the idea of sitting down with the building-based team is to develop a plan and consider everything from student accommodations to the different schedules that they have to work with in terms of their day and getting kids fed and complying with the contract, the teacher's contract, and the classified contract. So there's a lot that goes into establishing a period of time when you are providing assessments to students. So I will listen. I will bring any concerns back that I hear and communicate that to the board.
So is that something that we can do in the next meeting? I don't know, Dr. Hernan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the question asked was, does this contract need to be approved this evening?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then we can delay it to get additional information and insights.
And that may be a concern for iReady. I'm just putting that out there.
A concern in what?
In terms of their, we have diagnostic testing going on right now and with our grades 1 to 5, and they have not been paid yet. We have not bought their service yet. So that may be a concern for them, as I have communicated that this went up for board approval tonight.
So
But I would be
it's-
happy to bring the concerns back in terms of the assessment plan for iReady, SBA, WACAS, WIDA, all the other assessments that we provide.
Okay, so I guess for me, I could vote for this tonight with the assurance that we're going to get that other information at the next meeting. That I would do that.
All right, Edna and Bridget, are you okay going forward on this?
With a vote?
Well, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I still will not be approving this purchase. I'm hearing awareness of the vendor and what their concerns are. I'm not hearing that any consideration was paid to the that how our students and our families and our staff are doing. So to me, that it should be centered in all our decision making. And if things are being purchased and things are moving forward, even before the board makes decisions, that's concerning as well.
I hear you on that. And I guess I will call for a vote on this if there's no more discussion. And hearing that we're already using this tool, how many are would vote to approve this purchase? If so, say aye.
Aye.
And how many nays?
Nay.
All right, and I'm abstaining. Edna, are you abstaining? Have we lost Edna for a moment? I know she's in charge of.
Yes.
Oh, was that Edna?
Yes, I'm voting yes.
Okay, all right, so we will pass this at this time, and we will expect,
Jan, did it pass if you abstain?
yes, because you and Dave voted yes, Bridget voted no, and I abstained.
Well, I'm glad that we're going to have further conversation about it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll still have the follow through that was talked about, so.
And I would guess that if any board member wants to be a part of how that conversation unfolds with the community, I would suggest that you reach out to Mr. Baker and Dr. Herndon and see what can be put together on that.
And thank you for the invitation, Jan. I would like to extend the invitation to any families or students who would like to be part of that conversation or involved in any way to also be invited to the table.
Thank you for doing that. Yes. Well, let's move to our last agenda item, which is the approval of the superintendent contract for 21 to 24. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
All right. As we start discussion here, I want to clarify one thing on what we have before us. On the salary amount in 6.2, I just want to clarify that the salary amount that is listed there, thank you, Deb, that's listed there was the 218,000 was the 19 salary. So what we should have had there was the 20 salary. So the 2020 salary, which would have read 223,156 and some change. And then the new number, the 227, et cetera, is the 2-point IDP, or what we used to call COLA increase. So it looks like it is a big jump, but that's because the middle year with its COLA increase is not reflected there. And I just wanted to make sure that we understand where that number came from. Does that make sense? Is that what everybody else understands?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Is there other discussion on the contract?
Is it a 1.6 increase for COLA or is it a,
Aaron, did you tell me it was a 2.0 for this year?
Yes, and yes, it's 2%, which was the COLA for this year, or the IPD for this year, and Veronica can confirm that, but yes.
And that's the numbers the state determines every year and goes to everybody.
I don't get it. No, I'm sorry. Any other discussion on the contract?
thank you for clarifying that.
If there's no discussion, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, President Bullerjack, I just hope that this year our board performs in a way that follows the contract, because we're not following the contract. This contract is written for July 1st. We're starting October. And then in thinking about how we are, one of our main duties in this role is to be doing evaluation, and WASDA has best practices around that. And we really owe every single person who we serve to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. And yes, as a team, we need to pick up that evaluation tool from WASDA and use it throughout the year. If there's no further discussion, I will call for a vote. If you approve the superintendent contract 21-24, say yes.
Yes.
And if you do not approve, say no.
It is still a nay from me for the same reasons as I discussed last meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. That brings us to the end of our meeting, of our agenda. I want to, I'll call for an adjournment motion in a moment, but I want to thank all of you for the hard work that you've done. Board members, staff, guests, I hope you will continue to hold us accountable, that you will share your reflections and your feedback with us so that we can all work together to better and better serve our students in our community. And I will accept a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Anybody want to hang around longer? We love each other, but we're done for the evening. So if you vote to adjourn, please say yes. Yes. Yes, everybody. All right. All right. We are adjourned at 8:31. Good work, everybody. Good night. And we will keep working together as we can.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.